Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a special report that asks a pretty fundamental question: who is really pulling the strings in our world? We're going to go way beyond the daily headlines to explore this hidden architecture of power, one that, according to this report, stretches from old royal families all the way to the code that might just shape our future.
So the report we're breaking down today kicks off right here with this question. The idea is that the daily news, the elections, the stock market swings, that's all just stuff happening on the surface. But underneath it all, there's a much older, more structured game being played, with rules that have been in place for a very, very long time.
All right, so what's our game plan? First, we're going to meet these hidden architects. Then we'll jump back in time to see how their power shifted from actual crowns to financial capital. After that, we'll map out their modern-day web of control, take a look at a pretty startling potential future, they call it Techno-Feudal Horizon, and wrap it all up with the report's survival manual for the rest of us.
This quote from the report, this is the key to understanding everything else. It's saying that all the political drama and market news we follow, that's just the foam on the surface. If you really want to understand what's going on, you have to look at the massive, silent wave moving underneath.
Okay, let's get right into our first section: the hidden architects. So the report starts with a really powerful idea. True global power isn't held by just one group. Nope, it's a kind of symbiosis, a three-way partnership between historic family dynasties, giant corporate monopolies, and that permanent government bureaucracy. The real power, it says, is in how these three work together.
Moving on to Section 2, From Crowns to Capital. Now, this power structure didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The report actually traces its roots back for centuries, showing how the methods of control have changed, even if the end goal, consolidation of power, has pretty much stayed the same.
And this timeline here, it really lays out that whole evolution. You see, back in the 15th century, families like the Medici and Habsburgs used things like strategic marriages and controlling credit to build power. But the game really changed in the 19th century. Dynasties like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers had this incredible insight: why only assets when you can own the debt on those assets? So they shifted from controlling things to controlling the flow of capital itself. And this all led to the 20th century and the creation of private central banks, which basically put them in control of the entire financial system.
So here it is, the crucial insight. The report argues these dynasties weren't really in the oil business or the railroad business. They were in the business of building systems. They figured out that, sure, owning the factory is good, but owning the bank that holds the debt for that factory, that's even better. That way, governments can change, wars can be fought, but the financial structure underneath it all and the direction wealth flows, that stays constant.
And that brings us right to Section 3, the web of control. So we're moving from history to today. And the report makes this really bold claim: this web of control isn't just a theory anymore. It argues it's actually been scientifically mapped, revealing a core of corporate power so concentrated, it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
And it all comes down to this number, 147. Now, this isn't just some random number. It's actually the result of a massive study from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Researchers there basically decided to map the entire web of global corporate ownership just to see who really owns what.
And what they found was, it was staggering. Through this incredibly complex network where companies own shares in each other, they found a core of just 147 companies, that's less than 1% of the total, that formed what they called a super entity. And get this tiny core controlled a shocking 40% of the economic value of the entire global network.
And at the absolute center of that web, the report points to these three names: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. The argument here is that these aren't just companies. They are the modern-day stewards of all that historical capital we were just talking about. They let the old dynasties become almost invisible, managing their influence through these massive funds that quietly help shape global policy on everything from energy to healthcare, all happening miles away from any public vote.
This brings us to the report's definition of the deep state. And look, it's not some secret cabal in a smoky room. It's something much more normal, and maybe even more powerful: the revolving door. When a top executive from a huge bank gets appointed to the Treasury Department to write financial regulations, and then, a few years later, goes back to an even better job in that same banking industry, the report argues this constant cycle creates a permanent class of bureaucrats whose interests just naturally align with the corporate monopolies, not necessarily with the public.
So once it's established this picture of historical and modern power, the report does something pretty daring for Section 4. It tries to project all of this into the future.
It argues that this entire system of control is paving the way for something totally new, a system that isn't really capitalism anymore. And that's what the report calls Techno-Feudalism. This is a huge concept. I mean, think about it. We're already moving from a world where we own things to a world where we subscribe to things. You don't buy CDs, you subscribe to Spotify. You might not own a car, you subscribe to a ride-sharing service. The report's prediction is that this trend is just going to accelerate until the very idea of ownership starts to fade away from most of us. And in this new kind of feudalism, the land is the digital platform. And the tribute we all pay to the new digital lords isn't crops, it's our personal data.
This chart here really shows the stark difference. Under capitalism, value is in property you can actually own. In techno-feudalism, value is in the access that someone else controls. But the biggest shift, and maybe the scariest one, is right there at the bottom, the move from public law to private terms of service. Just think about how much of your life, your conversations, your money, your friends, is already governed not by the laws of your country, but by the terms and conditions you clicked agree on without even reading.
And for our last section, we get to the Citizen's Survival Manual. After painting this pretty intense picture of the world, the report doesn't just leave us there. It finishes up with a proposed framework for how regular people and communities can start to build some resilience against these massive, centralized forces.
So the manual lays out 4 key steps. First up, tech sovereignty, basically using tools like open source software to own and control your own data. Number 2, financial tangibility. This is about diversifying into real, physical assets that exist outside of that digital control system. Third, intellectual capital. This means developing practical, real-world skills that a robot or an AI can't just replicate. And finally, and maybe this is the most important one, networks of trust. The report's final argument is actually pretty simple but powerful. Their power is global and abstract, but our strength has always been local and real.
And so the report leaves us with this huge open-ended question. Will this system of control eventually get so complex that it just collapses on itself? Or will real change have to come from the outside, from people building new, decentralized alternatives? It's a critical question for our future. That's our breakdown of this incredible report. Thanks for joining The Explainer.